Police are searching a ranch for more clues in the death of a 21-year-old University of Texas student.
Authorities say that the devil worship and human sacrifice practiced here may be a brand of voodoo or black magic.
If anybody did not believe in the devil, this is it. It's right here.
We've all heard of cults doing some really shady stuff, right? But this one cult is going to blow your mind. Their rituals were not like one of an ordinary cult. The cult, called Narcosatanicos, was led by a Cuban man, Adolfo Costanzo, who tricked people into believing they could become invincible by sacrificing humans. Their way of killing was as gruesome as it could be, because they thought more pain led to more power. When someone would beg for mercy, Costanzo would ask his men to replace the subject with someone else. He had many victims, mostly bums whose disappearance nobody would care about. But when they kidnapped Mark Kilroy, their operation fell apart because of all the media attention they received.
There's no word to describe what we were finding, what we were seeing.
It was protection and good luck.
This is a religious sacrifice. This was a cult, there's no question about it.
The story of Mark Kilroy. Mark Kilroy was a 21-year-old regular American student. He studied in the University of Texas, but he was not an average student. He had really good grades, and not only that, but he also excelled at sports and other activities. It was the last year of his semester at the University of Texas, and he just got done with his exams, and his spring break had just started. Mark's hopes were high, but things took a turn for the worse when he and his friends set out on a trip to South Padre Island on 10th March, 1989. The deadly trip to Matamoros. Mark, with his friend Moore, picked up Huddleston, and Martin headed to Brownsville during their spring break, which was nearby, and from Brownsville, they went to the city of Matamoros, which proved to be horrifying for Mark. Matamoros was a Mexican city which was famous for its cheap drinks. Thousands of students over their spring break would visit Matamoros because they could party on a budget. Mark Kilroy and his friends were a few of them. They partied all night and went to different bars, drinking and dancing the whole night because they didn't want to waste even a second of their spring break, as it was their last. They went to their hotels afterwards. The following night of 11th March, they decided to head to Matamoros one more time. It was a city on the border between America and Mexico, so they parked their car on the American side of the border and started walking on foot. After enjoying a few drinks at El Sombrero, the group decided to check out the newly named Hard Rock joint, hoping to attract American kids. While there, Mark was chatting with a girl who placed third in the tanning contest. Eventually, Kilroy said goodbye to his female friend, and the four of them headed back towards the bridge. As they walked, they were in high spirits, joking and reminiscing about the day. Just about 200 feet from the American border, Huddleston dashed ahead to find a tree in the small park on Calle Obregon for a quick bathroom break. As he left, he saw a Mexican man approaching Mark. He didn't think anything because he thought it was someone Mark knew because of the way they were talking. When Huddleston went back to his friends, Mark wasn't with them. They looked for him for a bit and walked around, but they couldn't find him. So they obviously thought that he went back to the hotel alone because they had no reason to think negatively of the incident then. Also, it was really common for students to go missing in Matamoros and then turn up the next day hungover. So that's what they were expecting to happen. But the next day, Mark wasn't back, and the whole thing started looking suspicious. Search for Mark. The search for Mark began the very next day, but it was obvious there was foul play involved. Mark wasn't the type of person who could just vanish into thin air. He was a responsible guy. So for a guy like him to just disappear like that? Odd. Mark's uncle worked for the U.S. Customs, so his missing attracted a lot of attention. There were flyers everywhere. Even rewards of $15,000 were being offered for bringing them information. One of Mark's friends was put under hypnosis, as they thought it could give them a hint. And they were right, it did. His friend, under hypnosis, told them he last saw him talking to a Hispanic guy with a cut on his face. Mark's parents, James and Helen, flew to Brownsville to lead the search. On Sunday, March 26th, Mark Kilroy's case was featured on the television crime program America's Most Wanted. The show generated an outpouring of mail and telephone calls, but no useful clues. The roadblock incident. The authorities started leading a lot of anti-drug operations. In early April, some 3 weeks after Mark Kilroy had vanished from the streets of Matamoros, Elio Hernandez Rivera, 22, member of the Hernandez drug cartel, ran a routine roadblock. The Mexican police followed him instead of arresting him right away, hoping it would lead to some clues. He led them to the Santa Elena Ranch, a ranch in the middle of nowhere. There, Elio was arrested for running the roadblock and possessing marijuana. Elio wasn't cooperating with the police, but the Mexican police had some unusual ways of making him talk. They used a technique called tehuacanazo, in which carbonated water is forced down the detainee's nostrils. It's a perfect method for torture, as it doesn't leave behind any signs. On April 11th, Hernandez Rivera was taken in handcuffs to the Santa Elena Ranch, and the area was searched by the police, as that area had long been known by the police as a favored staging area for a ring of marijuana smugglers. So it was no surprise that it was owned by the Hernandez family. Discovery of Mark's mutilated corpse. Following routine procedure, they showed a picture of the missing Mark Kilroy to Serafin Hernandez, asking if he had seen him. To the police's surprise, he said yes. The caretaker confirmed that Kilroy had been at the ranch, pointing to a wire in the ground about 400 yards away. As they approached the supposed grave, a horrible smell filled the air. On 11th of April, they discovered several shallow graves nearby, containing the remains of 12 males, including Mark Kilroy. It was a gruesome scene, with victims whose bodies had been mutilated, their legs cut from the knee above. Testicles, penis, heart, and brain had been removed. 2 of the cultists were rumored to have been wearing necklaces made from human vertebrae when they were arrested. As if this wasn't disgusting enough, they would eat the heart of the victims while it was still warm. The count of corpses eventually reached 15, with the discovery of 3 more bodies. It was a truly horrifying and tragic find.
The bodies of the 12 men are being held at this morgue during the identification process. There is still a chance that other victims of the bizarre cult could be found at this ranch in Mexico.
As they continued the search, they saw that the shack had candles that were still lit, blood smear on the ground, human bones lying everywhere. It was a horrifying sight. The Mexican police understood it was an altar where they would perform black magic. But when the suspects were asked who had murdered Kilroy, they answered, El Padrino, the Godfather. Adolfo Costanzo, the Godfather. Adolfo was a Cuban 26-year-old at that time, whose mother and grandmother were also priestesses and would worship spirits at altars like these. Adolfo has always been described as strange. He wasn't a bully or anything, but he would scare people if someone was rude to him by leaving dead animals or blood at their doorstep. Even his stepfather was scared of him because of his unusual habits. But there was something charismatic about him that attracted people, and they would listen to him. Costanzo was a shadowy, duplicitous young man who frequented the gay bars of the city and affected a flashy lifestyle. He was older and far more sophisticated than Elio and others in the Hernandez gang. He was glib, relatively well-educated, and highly persuasive. There was a Manson-esque intensity about him, an aura that was partly rehearsed, partly instinctive, and fully evil. The Cuban offered to act as the Hernandez gang's high priest, protecting its members from all enemies and promising riches beyond their dreams. He was known as the Pied Piper of Death because of the way he could attract people. Even his name was Adolfo, which led people to believe he was the god of death or something. Sarah Aldrade, the godmother.
Sarah's involvement with the group. Well, she was like how do you say, like the madrina.
Sarah Aldrade was a normal girl, studying at an American college in Texas, which she would attend by crossing the border. She was a physical education major. She was in the same college as Elio Hernandez, where he was studying law, so he could become a better smuggler. Ironic, right? Aldrade was an excellent student. She's the type of person who says hi to you every day. Aldrade was leading a double life. On one side, she was an English major performing great and on the other side, she was a cult witch who performed black magic. Sarah was dating Elio, but when Elio introduced her to Adolfo, she was attracted to him and started obeying him. She would do whatever he said. She was the one who introduced Adolfo to the cartel. She would even sleep with people to gain their trust and introduce them to Adolfo. But later, after getting caught, she pleaded guilty and said she was being forced by Adolfo to do everything. Weird. Selection of victims. At first, victims would be selected from ranks of enemies like rival drug dealers or dirty cops who did wrong in an agreement, etc. Adolfo made Elio the execution priest. He was apparently a sweetheart priest who took out people's hearts while they were still alive. They planned to execute a dirty cop named Sausada when the execution went wrong and he pulled out a gun, so Elio had to shoot him and the ceremony backfired. Then he asked his men to bring someone else to commence the ceremony. They brought a young kid who was looking for his missing goat. They threw a gunny sack over the boy's head, and Elio didn't bother to remove the sack before sacrificing him. After Elio decapitated the boy, he looked at his headless body flopping around and took a good look at his jersey, which seemed familiar, just to find out he had sacrificed his nephew. Mark was selected randomly as they were given orders to abduct a gringo. Mark stood out with his tall body and blonde hair, which attracted the cult members. Destruction of the ranch. The Mexican police, being scared of the black magic items, ordered destruction of the Santa Elena ranch, considering it was the heart of the operation and Costanzo would be hurt by the gesture and maybe come forward since he was on the run. They destroyed the ranch and ordered a priest to come pray and purify the ranch so the poor victims could find some peace. Apprehension of the Godfather. 2 weeks after the burning of the shrine, they saw one of Adolfo's accomplices in a supermarket and followed him back to a rusty Mexican apartment. Inside the apartment was Adolfo and some of his companions. Adolfo realized the end was near and that he was about to pay for his crimes. Seeing that, he went crazy and started throwing cash outside the window and shooting at random passers-by. Costanzo could not tolerate the thought that his operation failed. In one last attempt of manipulation, he asked Alvaro de Leon Valdez to shoot him and his longtime accomplice. He said if he didn't do it, he would burn in hell, SE. But Alvaro listened to him and shot him and his companion dead. Soon the police busted the door open and saw evidence of black magic in the apartment, such as swords, voodoo dolls, etc. Costanzo and Quintana were in a cupboard, their bodies covered in bullets. Alvaro, Aldrete, and others were in the apartment. They were charged with multiple crimes such as manslaughter, wounding a police agent, and damage to property. Aldrete said she was innocent and was being held captive, but the police didn't believe her, and she was sentenced to 62 years in prison, which was later reduced to 30 years. She got released in 2002, and since then she has been free, manipulating people to listen to her version of the story. The truth is, there's a lot of twisted people in this world, and we don't even know how many of them may be hidden among us. These people can manipulate anyone according to their will, thinking they're God or above everyone. The world is a scary place, and Mark Kilroy and countless other victims of El Padrino deserved better.